Welcome to day two. It was wonderful seeing many of you yesterday. And today we are talking about energy storage solutions, powering India's renewable energy ambitions. So, we all are aware that we've had some fairly decent ambitions and renewable targets set for the whole country, the whole nation. And the pressing need is technological solutions to support this transition. I'm keen to hear from the panel on India's ambitious renewable energy target of 500 gigawatts by 2030. What are their views? Is it achievable or not achievable or exceedable? And what recent advancements in energy storage technologies can be scaled up to support a stable and reliable grid as we move forward towards this goal? So let's start with Navinder. What are your views on this?
To achieve the target by 2030, we need to have the entire chain of the energy systems in place. It's not only creating solar or wind or water renewable energies, but also to cater for the storage solutions and the infrastructure and the compliances, the regulations around it, the governance around it. So it's the entire 360-degree approach which will work. Otherwise, any loose ends will lead to systemic failures in parts or whole also, and that will impact a lot. For example, if you look at what ICICI Bank is doing, we are trying to finance renewable energy initiatives not only at the industry level, we are also financing these initiatives at the rural level by financing the microgrids which are working. And these microgrids are not only the energy production part, but also the energy storage part at the rural side.
So,
Also,
Navinder,
yeah.
we had Manish here yesterday,
Yes.
and he did touch upon some of those
Yes.
points. But what we'd love to understand is ICICI Home Finance able to take that story to the retail consumers? Are they
Yeah,
interested?
that's very interesting. So that's where the tough part is, frankly, right? So when we look at the green loans for the developers, the margin is very less, and the work that developers have to do to come up to the compliance levels is hell of a lot. So they need upfront, pumping in of some capital to start things happening, some incentivization of the loans further than what is being allowed now. Though the National Housing Bank, under which ICICI Home Finance comes, right now it doesn't have any of those very pragmatic or very highlighted kind of effects which could happen through further incentivization. So that needs to happen. Also, we need to look at how the various aspects around the developer loans, like the water table or the ecosystem around that, or the recycling capabilities of the ecosystem around. That has to be figured out, and a policy created to enable everybody, every stakeholder to participate fully.
Thank you, Navinder. That's quite insightful and appreciated. Mani, what are your views? I mean, we're truly trying to focus on energy storage technologies. Uh, is the 500 gigawatt target ambitious or easily achievable for India? And what kind of technology investments does India need?
A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Firstly, I don't think it is easy at all, this target. Right now, we are adding around 18 gigawatts a year. This needs to double to meet that, to meet the 500 gigawatt target. But it's not that it's not achievable. So, given the solar manufacturing capacity which is coming, given the way everything is aligned, we not only have to scale up the existing technologies, solar and wind, where the prices have already gone down, but we'll also have to actually look at new technologies like offshore wind. The Gujarat tender just came out this Sunday. The Tamil Nadu tender came out in February this year. And we have to look at floating solar. So it's all these technologies will have to work together to make you reach that 500 gigawatt target.
And what is the role that World Bank is playing in this?
Yeah. So having said that, all this 500 gigawatt will not be used if you don't get the storage inside. So the pumped storage and the battery storage both have to be looked at. Pump storage takes longer to establish. Battery storage is more modular, but both have to be done. And having said that, coming to the World Bank question, World Bank is working across this value chain. So we are investing in all renewable energy technologies. We are investing in all storage technologies.
So when you say World Bank is investing in all renewable and storage technologies, are you doing this in tandem with the banks, public sector banks of India and the NBFCs, or have you decided to go direct into the Indian funding diaspora?
So we can't do that.
Okay.
So the way the World Bank works is we only go into places where Government of India tells us to go.
Fantastic.
So we get a request from Department of Economic Affairs, and then we can work with banks because we have a long-standing engagement with State Bank of India, for example. So we lend through them.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. Tanya, over to you. What are your views on this?
Well, it might be slightly different from what I heard from my fellow panelists. And as a context, I'm a developer. I have built solar plants, and I've built 0.5 gigawatt plants starting at 18 rupees a unit to my last plant, which is at 2.5 rupees a unit. So the journey has been very long and one of consistency. And that's what I think the whole renewable value addition is about. So let's look at some facts. Today, you have about 200 gigawatts of renewable in India. 2010, that number was a mere 30-40, which was also largely driven by hydro and wind. There was almost zero solar. Today, there is 86 gigawatts of solar installed.
Fantastic.
And that has happened over 14 years, of which almost 50% of the time, solar prices were higher than coal, right? So it was actually not an economic solution so much, but actually driven a lot by subsidies and people like World Bank supporting us to build it. Today, the situation is very different. You can produce standalone solar power at 2.5 rupees. Imagine sitting in 2050, getting a 2.5 rupee power being produced. That is the
I think 2050, it would be far more less than that.
As in the project that you signed today has a flat 25-year PPA for 2.5 rupees.
Right.
So what I sign and I start delivering will give you power in 2050 also at 2.5 rupees is the point, right? So in my opinion, today you have reached an inflection point where the only thing that is limiting your growth is the amount of money you put in. Because in India, land is actually not a constraint. While it's a painful thing to do land acquisition, there is no constraint of land. Thankfully, we have been able to very well conquer the supply chain, get a lot of it in India. There's some portions which are still being imported, but given the policy support, even that is coming in-house, right? Grid is something that needs work on because there is intermittency, and that's where solar comes into play, and I'll come on that. But the thing that you need the most is you need trillions of dollars of financing to support it, which is where people like World Bank and ICICI have to step in. And this I'm only talking at the large scale level. You go to the microgrids or the rooftops and other levels, there is even like the PM Suryodaya Yojana scheme. You see today, the kind of applications, they're in millions, right? And people are talking about not just this, that they're saying, okay, give me debt support along with it so I can build it. So the limited point is, there is interest. The economic value of building it is now embedded in the business model. You are not looking at CSR, you're not looking at subsidies, you're looking at something that generates ROI, good hard cash, double-digit cash to do it. Now it's just about doing what you've already done, but in a more scaled up manner. So in my opinion, I would see that while the 500 gigawatt number looks very daunting, it is definitely achievable. And the government is also gearing up. Like just this year, you've already had 35 gigawatt worth installation auctions, right? So now those auctions have to convert into on the ground thing. But in 9 months, 35 gigawatt has been auctioned. So if you continue with a run rate of at least 50 gigawatts auction a year, you will build that 500 gigawatt.
And what I'm seeing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we just heard the US Ambassador Eric, as well as the Milken Institute, come and do a very gala dinner in Mumbai just last week. And they're like, the clean energy potential in India is about $750 million and moving forward. You're talking about trillions of dollars, and that would be obviously, I mean, our population, the way it's growing, our needs are growing, our need for resources are growing. I think this should all accumulate with foreign participation as well as domestic entities like ICICI and the other banks stepping up to the occasion. So, valid points, and thank you so much for being so insightful on this question. Moving forward, should we talk about this today about how investors believe that reduction in battery costs, and I think it's a sizable portion, is significant in attracting investments. So it's got me thinking of strategies that require to be bridged to bridge the gap between technology affordability and large-scale implementation. You spoke about large-scale implementation, but let's go back to Navinder to try to attempt to give us some insights. What are the battery storage costs have dropped around the globe, about 89%. So how are you seeing that kind of shaping the game here locally for us in India?
Definitely, it is a very good news. In fact, government needs to, re-augment and improve the policies which are around battery storage and the energy savings as such. The national policy of energy storage, which is there, needs to encompass various aspects like grid stabilization, the renewable energy projects which are there, and interlink the producers of renewable energy with the storage providers, and also try and create hybrid formulas which are accepted by the industry. In the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, MNRE, needs to push the renewable projects wherever solar and wind energy solutions are already there. In that, there is one problem which we have seen, that especially in Rajasthan, wherever we are having these industries to install their energy solutions along with the storage solutions. The problem is that in deserts, the hard standing is only provided by the grasslands. And the grasslands are the ones which the local population also depends upon for their, cattle and other needs, the water needs. Now, if they find, the big names, which I don't want to say right now, but the big names who are deploying their assets there, coming on, so there is negative publicity on the whole. Because these marginalized populations, the grazers, are the ones affected. So somewhere we also have to draw a balance in how we project and how we create those projects on ground.
Very insightful. Thank you so much. And I know we can't take some names, but also there are a lot of realities on the ground which we are not privy to. So rather not name or shame of anybody. Tanya, I mean, where estimates indicate that battery storage costs in India have fallen approximately about 60 to 70%, as opposed to global 89%. How are you seeing the opportunity unfold?
Sure, I think the opportunity is evident in the numbers that are being bid. As a fact, for the longest time, battery prices were about $1,000 to $1,500 per kilowatt hour. Today, in India, that is sub $150 per kilowatt hour. Now, what does $150 per kilowatt hour means? That means to be able to provide 24-hour green power at sub 5 rupees. The last 24-hour grid auction has happened and one at 4.99 rupees. So imagine you are getting unlimited green power at a price cheaper than coal and inflation adjusted for the next 25 years. That is the reality of battery storage in India today. And unfortunately, a large part of the batteries are still being imported. There is a PLI scheme of 18,000 crores that the government has allocated. But, like any other manufacturing setup, once you give a scheme, it takes about 2 to 3 years for the fruit of that thing to come out. So it will happen in that case. And that's the gap that you're talking about in terms of the Indian prices vis-a-vis overseas prices. But there is right now no dearth in the import. And the demand is more than the production you can do. which is why it's being imported at that price. As a context, 16 gigawatts of just BESS or BESS plus hybrid, like either a 24-hour power, hybrid plus storage, or just solar plus storage tenders have already been auctioned. And of this 16, 10 happened this year. So imagine from till last year, you were talking of single digit numbers. Now you're already in high double digits. And next year, we'll be talking of like almost 20 plus gigawatts of 24-hour solutions or storage solutions. So you're just going on a rapid exponential upward curve. And the beauty is you are cheaper than fossil fuels and you can produce 24-hour power. What was the biggest problem with renewable, right? Till now, it was intermittency. I only get solar, I only get wind till the sun shines or the wind blows. You have taken that away.
With
At
battery
cheaper,
storage.
exactly, with battery or pumped hydro. You know, I talk about both with equal persistence because at the end of the day, battery is still chemical. Pumped hydro is completely natural, but it has its own challenges because it takes longer to build. It's still more expensive. Battery is just chemical, so is exactly like how the solar PV cost curve came down, the battery curve has come down. You saw what happened when the solar PV cost curve came down, right? Solar was like in small digits being installed to now it's 40% of the total installed mix. So that's exactly the same replica that will happen now. And when you were doing solar, you were asked the same questions. Will you scale? Will you get big? Will you cross 50 gigawatts? So the same questions are being asked to battery now. And my answer to them is, please be patient. You saw that journey happening then. You will see the journey happening now. Just have faith in the process.
Love your passion for this.
In fact, I can just comment on what Tanya said.
Please.
She sparked the thought in me that 10 years ago in Delhi, we had the rickshaws, the major problem of auto rickshaws. That's been taken over by these electric bikes, the big way. That's all because of the, battery cost coming down. Similarly, there are rural electrification programs all over the country. There's a Saubhagya scheme which intends to have 100% electrification in rural areas. Now, such rural areas which are earlier depending on the main grid, today can go for an offline grid by, localizing these microgrids which I was talking about earlier.
Thank you, Navinder. That's quite useful context. I mean, don't want to leave money out of the conversation here, but Tanya talked about the PLI, but is PLI the only solution? Because we do believe that a lot of public-private partnerships are kind of evolving in this space. At the same point of time, I think World Bank takes a lot of initiative in capacity building, in training people, in exposing people to best practices across jurisdictions. So how do you think your World Bank support can play a incremental and fast forward the battery storage kind of incubation stage that we are in, or the early stage we are in?
So before I start answering, so I think we are mixing two things. One is battery storage for the power system. And this is where your first question of 500 gigawatt came into the picture and how much battery or pump storage can be used. The EV side of it is a completely different picture. And the PLI scheme which came out, frankly, it even though did not specify whether it was for e-mobility or for the power system, very clearly all the bits came out what was used in EVs. They are actually, so the whatever we have given, the government of India has given, has all gone towards EVs. Why? Because the FAME 1, FAME 2, FAME 3 set it all in place so that the manufacturing happened there first, because that portion was moving much faster. I frankly believe, and there's a lot to be done when it comes to the power system and the battery storage. We have pilots right now. We have bids which have come out, which has seen the prices go down. The Gujarat 2 bids which came out right now, the prices have gone down. There's a lot to be done. If you go and visit the states, which the World Bank is doing, the coming to your capacity building thing, we are actually going and talking to states. All the states know they need battery storage, but they don't know how to analyze as to how much storage, where should it be put, and more importantly, the regulator comes to the picture. Because if they have to invest in battery storage, it has to be cleared by the regulator. For that, the regulator has to understand are the different values which can be stacked up for battery storage. The US, a lot of mistakes were made initially where they actually had a contract for only one of those values for battery storage. Then they realize there are so many other values of battery storage. Why don't we, So there's a lot to be learned from international experience out there. A lot of hand holding is required at the state, especially at the regulator. So they give it a green signal and it can be installed. So we need it, everyone realizes it, but a lot of capacity building is required to do that.
Thank you. Going forward towards, the power grid system, and considering that India's power grid faces stability challenges, it has inherently, during especially the peak renewable generation periods in 2023, coupled with some increasing integration of renewables as well as initiatives like the Green Energy Corridor, and the revamped distribution sector scheme, the RDSS, to strengthen the grid's infrastructure. What additional technical and infrastructure changes are required to integrate large-scale energy storage systems? So, Navinder, where do you see I hear you in the last two responses that you've given us. A lot of policy initiatives are required.
Yeah.
But what role does the private sector play?
Well, we can look for technology intervention in two ways. One is to create smart grids. That will help, balance the peak demand with the generation of solar and wind energy. So on one side, you have certain periods when your solar and wind energy production is on high capacity. On the other side, you have those low demand and peak demands. Somewhere you need to balance this out. So smart grid formulation will help in that. Second is, you have offline grids, you have online grids. Somewhere an aggregator model can come in very handy, where you have an aggregator of all the small grids, which is a bank in itself, to try and push up, pump up, or be a backup.
And even direct the need on need basis,
yes.
I guess.
And third is, of course, the industries need to gear up their own backup storage and backup power for augmenting the main grid. That will also help.
So you're saying supplemented by private.
Yes.
Fantastic. Tanya, what are your thoughts? And if I may also ask you to, kind of chime on how these changes will enhance grid resilience, managing the supply and demand mismatch.
Sure. So, learning exactly like you said, to look at your international counterparts. One of the things that is globally done and definitely needs to be done in India is not just have storage at the plant end, but have storage at three different parts. First is at the generating source. So whether it's solar PV or wind or a hybrid system. So first you store at the generating side. Second, you store at the grid, the place where you're actually infusing power. So which is in the government control, where they take a control on how much power I have and how much I release. And third, you store at the consumer end. Only when you'll have a nexus of storage at three places: the generating source, the transmitting source, and the consuming source, will you be in a place that you can balance the system. Else the system will fail. Now, how do you have three such diverse people talk to each other? That's where AI or smart grids or an ecosystem like a bidding system that's there already comes into picture, right? Today, in a world of AI, you can predict very well how well you'll be able to generate. The same way you predict when to store, when to release, but you cannot do that if you don't have infra at all three places.
Fair
But
point.
to do that, you also need the infra, right? Like there are a lot of remote places where you build these solar plants. There is no evacuation infra there. So we need to bump that step as well. And while it's clear that it takes you about 2 years to build a large substation or the grid lines, unfortunately, the hard reality is it doesn't get done in 2. It takes a little longer. So you need to not just invest in storage, you need to pre-invest in actually building the grid and then storage at the three ends: the generating end, the grid end, and the consumer end. And then marry this through a good software AI-based data solution, and then you'll be able to get a good grid stability.
Awesome. You are into solution building. But Tanya, just staying on that thought, I mean, when you say, build it at 3 different layers, what is the kind of leakages we are experiencing currently?
So today you typically get not more than 90%, 90 to 93% efficiency in a charging discharging cycle. You know, with a lot of research, you'll be able to take it north of 95%, but that's the global benchmark. So there is that level of leakage. But let's talk about flaring of power. Today in peak time, there is north of 20-25% power being flared. So if you compare it to that quantum, the leakages that you will have in storage because of the charging to discharging efficiency are not that big. And the prices that you're talking about of the yield power, you know, the bidding auctions and all, have already incorporated into place this inefficiency. So yes, it's not the ideal world or the best solution where you are getting 100% of what you store. But vis-a-vis completely flaring something and losing 100% or getting your grid shut down or asking the plants to shut down, this seems at least a much better solution.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying and shedding light on something like that. Mani, would you like to chime in on what both Navinder and Kanya have already mentioned?
Thank you. So, I agree. In the ideal world, you can put it there, but it costs a lot of money. We are talking about a lot of money, which frankly, by the end of the consumer will have to pay. So are we ready for the prices to go up the way they're supposed to? So this has to be done. So every state right now is trying to figure out whether it makes sense to put it at the generation or you put it in the grid. Frankly, consumer end, we are far away from it. It will be done with the scheme coming in of solar rooftop. You're putting battery storage. The thing is, you have to realize by the end of it, the weakest link in our entire power sector value chain is the distribution companies. Most of them are in red. They are in red for a reason. There's a mindset change when the ERP solutions, as simple, because it happened long time back, you can say as simple as ERP solutions came out, it's very difficult to implement those in the distribution. Government had to come out with how many bailout schemes till you actually saw any work done at that level. There is a mindset issue, there's a capacity issue, and you can't blame them. Go and sit in a distribution company's office one day. You'll realize how they are firefighting for every second of things. There's a lot of money that goes in building that infrastructure, and it takes time. And therefore, a lot of planning has to happen. So these are the realities. Yes, if you really look at the big picture, it should be done like that. And frankly, with AI there, it is easy to do it. But who are you giving that AI solution to? And who is using it on the ground? So we have to understand that there are limitations and there has to be a step-by-step approach.
But Mani, aren't you really coming back to the point that there are inefficiencies in the system, and there's a role of capacity building, knowledge building, knowledge enhancement. I don't know how much is the aggregate pay structure at distribution companies. I think that also plays a lot of big role in retaining good talent.
So this is the crux of the issue, because when I go for these conferences right now, we are not talking about the weakest link. We are talking about the big picture always. Keep putting in more money. Guys, you'll not get the money back if you don't do something about the distribution. There are a lot of financing going on there. Who will pay you back? The point remains, so coming to your capacity building, yes, it's required, but it cannot be done in a day. It takes time, and bailouts keep happening at the level. So we have to, so yes, so it is, and every state is different. I'll give you an example, and without naming the state, when we started working with this distribution company, we actually put in KPIs at everything. They didn't know what KPI, but we put it. I said, there has to be a way you measure what you do, because there's nothing like that happens out there, right? So we are talking about changing things which have been happening for 50 years. And there is a lot of pushback. So this is where I would urge anyone who can put money, who can put resources, to work with the distribution company.
Well, good point and very well taken. And I hope the audience also appreciates that if they are interested in the power sector and the renewable transition of India. what we'll do is, in the interest of time, we'll just have a little bit of rapid fire questions, just to get everybody also interested. And if we have time, yesterday we had requests that please open the panel to the floor, and maybe somebody in the audience might want to ask some questions. So Tanya, let's start with you, because you are the developer on the panel, and your passion shines through the way you speak. What is the one breakthrough in battery technologies do you believe will have the most significant impact on solar energy storage in India over the next 5 years?
I would say a large part of the breakthrough is happening, which is the cost curve coming down. But I want a consistent, low cost battery solution, which is efficient, low charging, discharging, this thing, and locally available so that the service support is there. Low cost, locally available, efficient battery storage system.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Navinder, you represent one of the India's leading banks, private sector banks, and financing is always one of the challenges, whether it's number one, number two, or number three. So name the three biggest challenges that, in ICICI's perspective, is there to finance energy storage projects in India?
Well, the first thing is we do not have a priority sector lending norms for EVs and battery storage. That needs to come in. Second is the GST. It has to reduce from 18 to 5%. And third is obligations on part of the bigger entities of power distribution to purchase renewable energy.
Just right on the dot. I think you've nailed it. Mani, in order of ranking for the three most crucial and impactful policy changes that India could implement right now to attract large-scale private or blended finance into energy storage solutions.
Interesting. I'm not doing. First, I think we need to open up our power markets. If you really want these energy storage solutions to thrive, apart from where it makes sense, as we discussed on the generation level, therefore you see all the energy storage which has come up right now is at the generation level. There are few projects out at the transmission level because it's the value. If you don't give them give them the money for the value they are generating, why would people invest? That's the first thing, for sure. Secondly, and this is more on a personal view because I did the research on this, you keep telling people go for EV. But whereas if you put so much of duty, because you don't produce these EVs in the country, but when you put so much of duty for people to import that, it becomes expensive, it's non-viable. Why would you go for EV? Because everyone is replacing their car after 5 to 6 years. Give them the incentive to buy an EV. Don't make it that difficult for them. And lastly, I think this again goes to the thing. I think till we develop the manufacturing capacity, and this is a blanket statement in country, push for manufacturing capacity, but till we don't put constraints on getting it from outside. You are actually putting your own growth on a different path there.
Very good points, Mani. I think all of them extremely valid. And may I add to that? I mean, on one side, we are saying that don't put import duties on importing parts and encouraging, therefore, better EV adoption. But shouldn't also we be, on the other hand, discouraging diesel variants and petrol variants being launched in the country?
So this is
tricky, very tricky.
This is tricky because we are talking about an entire value chain which is dependent. See, and I understand. And I'll give you an example. What we are trying to do, when you are moving towards coal to renewable energy and battery storage also, there's a huge population dependent on coal. And that has to be then realigned into renewable energy. Reskilled, upskilled. So they can, why would you leave that population behind? You can't do that, right? Similarly, frankly, even though it's all private players, they also have to think about the future. As they go towards the EV, what will happen to the other skill set? How do they make that happen? And that needs to happen.
Very well. And I think that's where I think World Bank's just taxonomy, just transition taxonomy kind of comes and plays a role. What I'll do is right now, Navinder, I'll open the floor for one question from the audience and I'll let you make your point right after that. Please, is there anybody who has a question in the audience for the panel? Yes, please. Can somebody pass a mic to him?
Hi everyone, my name is Jayaprakash. So I have a question regarding the solar energy. So we have two models in general, one is on-grid and second is off-grid. So generally most of the people prefer the on-grid model because in case if a consumer is not consuming, it goes to the grid and can be utilized, by the other consumers. But when we talk about the offline grid, which also involves batteries, to be placed at the consumer site, first it increases the cost, and second, in case the consumer is not available, let's say for few months or traveling for a week, does it lead to a waste of the solar energy because there is no consumption happening during that period? Or which model is better?
Thank you for your question. I hope it's taken. Anybody who wants to take a shot at it?
Let's do it in parts. So I'll do one part of it. I'll tell you why both are important. Online grid is important where you have regular electricity supply happening and you need to balance out these things, and even the main grid requires supplement energy. Whereas offline grid is required where you have disruptions, frequent disruptions, you do have inaccessibility to regular power. You need power generation for that. But I understand where you're coming from. You don't want that solar power to be wasted away. Well, in that we can have localized grids, micro grids. That's what, again, the third time which I'm mentioning. So this thing is getting more and more noticed as a requirement. So that's where I think it gets balanced out. Both are required.
And off-grid is typically places where you actually can't take the large grid. So for people, imagine, who have no access to power. From there, of zero access, you have a solution which gives you some access. There you have to find innovative solutions if you're saying that the whole, like the micro community itself is not able to use it. Like if you look at the recent PM Suryodaya Yojana scheme, it's linked to EV charging. You say, okay, if the community is not able to use it, can you power it for something else? Can you build an EV charging station which somebody else can come and pay you for? But again, these are stepping step blocks. For a community which had no power, you're giving them power. Now you're saying they have too much power. What do they do with the power that they don't want to flare?
I hope we've answered your question. Navinder, your last closing remarks.
While we were talking about, allowing imports and other things, I'm also a strong advocate of creating government regulatory frameworks for recycling of batteries. That is one. Second is second life batteries. There are no standards for second life batteries. So if these are there, then, and also an extended producer responsibility on part of these battery manufacturers to take back those used batteries.
Amazing point, Navinder. Yesterday, I was moderating the panel on circularity and recycling. So you've just chimed in right into it. Mani, what you would like
So
to closing
I'm
remarks?
just happy to say that we are working on this with the government. So we have a battery storage project where we are working on safety. So guidebook for safety, because it's important that we don't make the same mistakes which people across the world have made already. And the second is in the recycling, and we are looking at also second life of batteries. Once you use it in EVs, can you use it for battery storage in the power system? So that's being done.
All I will say is the future is bright and you're ready to get solarized.
Thank you, everybody, for your attention. I hope it was worth your time. Please give a round of applause to our lovely panelists. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much, ma'am, again also for doing the moderation. A picture, please.